2 years ago, I was walking down the street I live on. It's called 8th Avenue, which I'm aware makes me sound like I live in some bohemian apartment in New York, but it's much less glamorous than that. It's a terraced street in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England, where the most arty thing you'll find is a broken window. But something suddenly struck me. I remember thinking, there's about 300 people living around me, and I don't know any of them. Loneliness is a big problem. Figures from the ONS have shown more than 1 in 4 houses in the UK now has someone living alone in them. Similar stories can be found all over the world, and doctors have warned that loneliness is more dangerous to your health than smoking. As well as this, it also seems to me that loneliness is making us more judgmental as well. Now, more than ever, we're not meeting people who live their lives differently to us. So we're generalizing. We're creating these myths. Hate crimes in Europe and America are at an outrageous high, and I don't think it would be going too far to suggest that the rise of hate towards ethnic minorities is in many ways down to a lack of social interaction. But we all generalize in some way or another, don't we? It's the same process that leads people to say, Americans, yeah, they're all like that, aren't they? Or the Dutch, yeah, they're all like that, aren't they? The truth is much more complicated. People don't fit into neat little boxes, and they can very often surprise you by doing or saying something that you really weren't expecting. So, I'm a poet, right? And I know most people think poetry is basically pointless. But I was wondering, what can I do about this problem? How can I take this small, insignificant skill that I have and with just a couple of words on a page, do something that helps to highlight the loneliness in our culture and questions some of the stereotypes in it as well? This was my idea. I decided to become the world's first door-to-door poet. This is how it works. I pick a street. I start at 12 and I finish at 6. In that time, I need to find 5 people to write a poem for. I knock on a door and count to 45 in my head. If no one answers, then I move on. And to be honest with you, right, a lot of the time no one does. But every now and again, someone answers. And when they do, I tell them I'm doing an art project. I don't use the word poetry because that would be madness. I ask them if they've got 1 minute and 10 seconds to spare, and if they say yes, I do a poem for them. And that poem goes like this. I'm a door-to-door poet, and my hair could be much neater, but this could be worse though. I could be some kind of preacher. In school, they taught us poetry's bust, wrote by toffs who've turned to dust on country manners, deathly shrouds, serious lords and fluffy clouds. And I found it quite hard to relate. I grew up on a rough estate, walls thin as paper used to trace the clouds an endless tone of grey. I'm here to make poetry exciting, like bungee jumping, but less frightening. So I'm at your door to find the subjects that flow through your mind. Tell us about your life. Okay, maybe not the whole of it. I'll stick it in a poem for you or have a decent go at it. Maybe you heard a great story you'd love to hear in rhyme. Maybe your blood is boiling from a recent council fine. Maybe you dropped your iPhone 8 and it fell down the toilet. I don't know. I can't decide for you because that would spoil it. So cheers for listening to these verses. I hope I got across my purpose. Don't slam the door. Don't be nervous. The door-to-door poet is at your service. After this, I have a conversation with the person about what's important to them. This can be absolutely anything. Then I go away and write a poem about it, free of charge. 2 weeks later, I go back to the area I visited and deliver all 5 poems. I perform each one on the doorstep for every person and give them a written copy with the website in the top right-hand corner. I blog about everything that's happened to us, and I hope that by going out, meeting these strangers and recording their stories, I can show the rest of the world how interesting and unique our neighbors can be. But when I first talked about doing this, a lot of people were worried for my safety. The northeast of England is an economically deprived area, and it isn't exactly famous for its love of the arts. One of the first places I visited as a door-to-door poet was an estate near my house called the Biker Wall. The Biker Wall is a barrack-like stretch of 620 flats with a reputation for crime and violence. I told a lot of my friends I was planning on going there, and they all made exactly the same sound. It was a sort of Marge Simpson-esque expression of unease. As well as this, I spoke to a local police officer called Amy, who strongly advised us not to go. If you do, she said, carry some pepper spray and don't take any valuables. So as you can imagine, by the time I got there, I was terrified. I was shaking and it was raining, and I really just wanted to go home and forget about the whole thing. But I didn't know what the people of the Biker Wall would be like for sure, and I wanted to find out. Despite what everyone had told us, I needed to trust them. And this was going to have to work both ways too. They were going to have to trust that I wasn't going to rob them, and I was going to have to trust that they weren't going to drag us inside the house and cut us apart slowly with a junior hacksaw. I picked a part of the estate near the main road, so it would be easier to run. I tried a few doors and got no reply. At the next one, a man came out with bright blue eyes and a peaked baseball cap. I nervously performed my poem for him while he stared at us completely expressionless. Once I'd finished, I said, so what's your name? And he said, Carl. And I said, and tell us, Carl, what's important to you? And he looked us up and down. And after a very long pause, Carl said, will you write us one about how much I love my girlfriend? And this situation had gone from hardcore to sentimental in about 3 seconds. I had a fantastic time in the Biker Wall. Everyone was really friendly and enthusiastic. I definitely didn't need any pepper spray. I found 7 people to write a poem for. We talked about everything from judo to the problems with organized religion to the joys of pastry. The whole experience really challenged my pre-convictions. Don't get us wrong, I'm not trying to say awful things don't happen. And I'm not trying to deny that there's some very dangerous people out there. But I couldn't help but wonder what gave these residents such a bad reputation. It seemed that this myth had grown about the wall. This fear that everyone in Biker was like this. But once I got out and started meeting people, it didn't really seem that way. After my visit to Biker, I got a grant from Arts Council England to go around the northeast as a door-to-door poet. To this day, I still can't really believe I managed to turn this into a job that I actually get paid for. I decided I was going to go to Fenham. Fenham is another suburb of Newcastle, and it has quite a large Asian community. When I told people what I was planning, the responses were again mostly cautionary. The residents wouldn't speak any English. They'd be distrustful of us. All of the husbands would be at work and their wives are told not to answer the door. But despite these warnings, I still found 5 people to write a poem for. And they all had very varied lifestyles as well. On the one hand, I met Sammy, a devout Muslim who asked for a poem about the mosque across the road from him. On the other, I met Salman, an 18-year-old lad with a passion for skateboarding and hip-hop. I'd like to add here that it was actually Salman's mum who answered the door as well. She initially said she wasn't interested, but then remembering that our son did art at college, she came down the street to invite us inside to meet him. A lot of my visit didn't really fit with what people said would happen. It seemed again there was this myth about people in Fenham. Being a door-to-door poet for the past 2 years has been one of the most exciting, life-changing things I've ever done, but it isn't always positive. Having gone around a lot of poor areas, you see things that are often hard to come to terms with. One of these places was Stockton-on-Tees, a town with a high level of unemployment. I ended up on Hartington Road. Do that bit again. I ended up on Hartington Road. Hartington Road was described to us on 3 separate occasions as the roughest street in Stockton. If you ever go to Stockton, you'll understand how terrifying a phrase like that can sound. Although the people I met were again overwhelmingly friendly, it was hard to handle some of the things they talked about. The last person I spoke to was a taxi driver called Madge. He invited us inside for a cup of tea, and when I asked him what was important to him, he talked about the sheltered accommodation a few doors down, houses offered to the homeless and those recovering from drug and alcohol problems. On a daily basis, Madge sees people who've been forgotten by society, people who don't have jobs, who can't seem to get themselves out of the terrible situation they're in. And he spoke passionately about how quick we are to judge, about how we never really look beneath the surface to see what's going on in these people's lives. If I've learned anything as a door-to-door poet, it's that people can surprise you. You can't tell what someone's going to be like from their accent, their clothes, the color of their skin, or the place that they live. What I've done might not work for everyone, but what I do know is we need to be less lonely and less judgmental. I wrote this poem for Madge. It's called The Tune of Alan Palmer, and it's a true story. His feet leave watermarks around the station. His shivering body dressed in soggy rags. His head bowed low. The hollow cheeks unshaven, and round his neck, a weathered sleeping bag. The people all around him look straight through. The suits and wheelie cases circle past. A crowd of rowdy lasses on a hen do, pink miniskirts and feathered cowboy hats. He spots an old piano by the door there for anyone to play who's passing by. He sits down in the oak and velvet chair and lifts the lid like he's about to try. A copper comes and stops him, shoulder tapping. He tells the man it's best that he got moving, but now the hens have spotted him. They're clapping. The copper smiles. This could be quite amusing. Let's watch the tramp play something crap on here. The gathered hens all start to point and laugh. He reckons he's all posh and that, they sneer and get their phones out for a photograph. The giggles choked. The ugly smiles are frozen as his filthy fingers touch the keys and gently fill the room with sweet Beethoven. the gloomy, knowing sound of Fur Elise. He plays it perfect. Every note is haunting. The space becomes the London Colosseum, and down one girl's cheek now a tear is pouring. It breaks each heart to look and really see him. For half an hour, they listen to him shining and get a sense of something hard to bear, that homelessness does not mean they aren't trying, of futures shattered by a lack of care, that every person's born with golden talents, but tragic circumstance can crush the spirit, that every life is hanging in the balance, and we could lose it all at any minute. Thank you.